Hey guys, Kudabiza here, and I am surrounded by greatness. Today I am with two-time Olympic athlete Brian Dzingai. We're in sunny Florida, and I just wanted to sit down with him to just talk to the man, the myth, the legend about his experiences going to the Olympics and racing Usain Bolt. So anyway, Brian, how you doing, man?
I'm good, Kuda. Thanks for having me today.
Great. So anyway, tell me your journey. How did you go from being the Zimbabwean student coming to America, getting into athletics, and taking over the space?
Yeah, great question, man. I used to run in high school. I was always fast, and in my junior year, like in high school, was at a track meet. Um, a guy who was my former captain of my school team when I was in eighth grade showed up at the track and told me that I had the talent to make it to the collegiate level.
Hmm.
And in that moment, this guy called Mitch planted that seed, and that sort of triggered me applying to schools in the U.S. And I landed at a school called Truman State University.
Where is that?
Truman State University is in Kirksville, Missouri, in the middle of nowhere.
Oh wow.
Yeah. It was a small little college town
Hmm.
where there was nothing but just a Walmart.
Okay. So you guys would go to Walmart to kind of like hang out on a Friday night.
That was the thing to do on a Friday night. Go to Walmart and go shopping.
So what was your experience like at Truman?
Truman State University was a great experience for me because it was a small, intimate school,
Nice.
and I was there for about 2 years, and I made many great friends, many of which I still speak today. I
Hmm.
speak to today,
Right.
and yeah, it was just a great time. But after 2 years, I felt like it was time for me to make a change, and I moved from cold Missouri to sunny Florida, and made the shift to the big boys, and I went to Florida State University.
So before we go to your transition to Florida State, let's talk about Truman State. What were some of the things you really got out of that 2 year experience? Were there any meaningful relationships that you were able to take away? Were there things that maybe helped you become a better athlete while you were there?
Yeah, absolutely. I think when I look back and I think about how Coach Ed, who was my, coach then, how him and I developed a relationship over 2 years. I think that was instrumental for me because at that point in time, this was the furthest away I'd been from home and the most amount of time I'd stayed away from being home, and we developed like a bond. And that bond was built over time because every Monday morning,
Hmm.
on my way to my job, I would stop by Coach Ed's office,
Nice.
and we would talk about my track performance that
Hmm.
the previous weekend, and then we would sort of talk about the things I had to do differently that we can practice to help me improve for the next competition. So over time, I think that helped to develop that bond with Coach Ed Schneider. And then just thinking about lessons I learned just during that journey, right? If I think about my freshman year, right, I was running without any fear because I didn't know any better, and I
Mm.
performed at an extremely high level. But going into my sophomore year, the pressure started to kick in because I was trying to
Oh wow.
replicate what I did in my freshman year, and I just couldn't find that same magic.
Interesting. So your Monday morning thing with Coach Ed became more like a routine you do.
Absolutely, I think it became a routine that was consistent on a weekly basis, and I mean that just led to us just getting closer and closer.
So the time you went to Truman State, Zimbabwe was going through a very harsh economic time. And coming from Zimbabwe myself, I kind of like came the same time as you did. How did you pay for your college?
Yeah, that's a great question. And when I got to Truman State University, I was given a partial academic and a partial track and field scholarship.
Hmm.
Those two amounts total 6,000. Tuition back then was about $7,000. My parents only had to pay $1,000 out of pocket, plus pay for room and board. Um, towards the end of my freshman year, I had broken school records, and I was an All-American athlete,
You're
and
crushing it.
I was literally crushing it. Right.
Yeah.
When the summertime came, it was time for me to go to London and work for the summer, and I was gonna live with my sister. But there was a good chance that I wasn't gonna come back because my parents couldn't afford to keep sending me money.
Right.
So right before like I left for that summer,
Hmm.
like the summer of my freshman year, I went into like Coach Ed's office and I said to, listen, Coach, I'm going away for the summer, but there's a good chance that I'm not coming back.
Hmm.
My parents have asked me to move to New Jersey to live with my uncle. And just to be honest, the whole thing about New Jersey was a total bluff. I didn't have an uncle living like in Jersey. And like the very next day before I left for the summer, and my
Wow.
intent to leave for the summer was to go and work and make some money, he offered me like a full scholarship,
Wow.
right? So going the summer, I was just basically going to work, and that money was going straight into like my own pocket.
Wow. That's an incredible story, and sometimes it's interesting how those types of things manifest. So you go to FSU, bigger school, way bigger school, right?
Yes.
It's kind of like going from economy to first class.
Absolutely,
You know.
absolutely.
So tell me, what were some of the things that were very different between Truman State and FSU, and also was Truman State a D1 school as well?
Yeah. So great question. So Truman State was a small Division two school,
Okay.
right? If I think about Truman State, we had about 6,000 students. So moving from a small Division two school to a big D1 school like Florida State, where now you have 40,000 students, right? It was a total shift in like mindset, culture, everything. I was dealing with a roommate from Miami called Nitro, all right? So it was just a huge cultural change for me. And honestly speaking, there were huge expectations laid on me, and I struggled a great deal because there was just a lot of pressure.
Right.
And probably about halfway through my junior year, I started hearing whispers about how this Zimbabwean guy wasn't worthy of a full scholarship because, honestly speaking, I struggled.
You weren't pulling your weight.
Yeah, absolutely. But there was one person that sort of kept their faith in me and kept working with me and staying in my ear, and that was like my coach Ken. So towards the end of my junior year, things started to like sort of look up, and I was the only athlete on the team that qualified for 4 events for nationals that year. I qualified
Oh, wow.
in the 4x1, the 4x4, the 120-meter dash.
And for people watching right now, if they're in college trying to make the most out of their college experience, or better yet, 2025, I think, or 2026, it's an Olympic year, or
2020, 2024.
2024 is an Olympic year in
Yeah.
Paris. So what would you tell someone who's watching right now, who's in college, who's trying to qualify for the 2024 Olympics? You've been to two,
Two Olympics.
so you have a lot of experience when it
Absolutely,
comes to
absolutely.
qualifying for Olympics. So what advice would you give them?
Honestly speaking, I would tell you to step it back, to take a step back, and start to have fun, right? And fun is something I define as flourishing under no pressure. And when I think back to my journey, and I think about my freshman year, where I was running that sort of aimlessly, without any pressure, not knowing what I was doing. And then after having a rough junior year and going into my senior year, I said to myself, I'm going to enjoy every race like it's my very last race. I'm going to enjoy the actual journey, practice, being around like my teammates. So I knew that after my senior year, this was all coming to an end. And having fun allowed to take away the external pressure and just take things on a daily basis and fully be engaged in the actual journey of trying to get there. Just to be honest with you, it wasn't in my grand plan to make an Olympic team, but because I chose to have fun, and I did have fun, in almost every race I ran that year, my senior year, it was close to being like a personal best. And my very first race of the outdoor season, I ran 20.36, which was my fastest time in 4 years, and it was also an Olympic A qualifying standard, right? So I didn't chase to be an Olympic athlete. I chose to have fun, and then being an Olympic athlete happened because I chose to have fun, and I was enjoying like the actual journey.
So what Brian is saying basically is that, sometimes people put added pressure on themselves, right?
Absolutely.
You overthink things and you forget to have fun, and by doing that, you actually then curb your own personal success.
Absolutely. And when we when we start to let the pressure kick in, we are worrying about things that we can't control. And when you sort of think about the sport of track and field, you're taught to focus on your lane. And when you focus on your lane, it allows you to focus on only those things that you can control. And because you can't control what the person next to you is actually doing.
Right.
But if you focus on what you have to do, it's going to allow you just to perform at your level best.
Perfect. So, you went to FSU, and then 2004 was the first Olympics you went to in Athens.
Absolutely.
How did that go?
Man, so I went in there ranked as the 7th fastest man in the world in the 20-meter dash. And I still left the Athens Olympics ranked as the 7th fastest man in the world in the 20-meter dash.
Yes.
But I didn't make it past.
Okay.
Yeah.
I didn't make it past.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
We're good.
I didn't make it past.
but I didn't make it past like the second round.
Oh wow! So you won the first race. When you went into the second heat race,
Yep, I just didn't make it. I think that was a combination of me not being ready.
and you not having fun, right? Not
And
flourishing under.
absolutely
Yep,
right,
yep, yep.
and me not having fun, and not having like just a plan, right? Because it wasn't an expectation that we'll be competing up until August of that year.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
So what did that experience teach you, right? Because you go in, you're highly ranked. People are expecting that you're going to be in the Olympic final for the 200-meter dash, and then you get beat, and I'm pretty sure you were feeling devastated, right?
Yeah.
You let the whole nation down because every Zimbabwean was looking at
Absolutely.
you
Absolutely.
to kind of like showcase that, and obviously with Kirsty Coventry doing a thing on the swimming side, but obviously from the track and field side of things, a lot of focus was on you. So how did that experience shape you, and also what were you going through in that moment when you were facing this upset?
Yeah, honestly speaking, I was extremely disappointed because I felt like I should have done a lot better in those games.
Mm.
But the one thing it taught me was that if we had some semblance of a plan, right, and granted, Olympics happen in a 4-year cycle, and a lot of things can change or happen in a 4-year cycle. But if we had some semblance of a plan, we could be in a position to give ourselves a legitimate opportunity to make an Olympic final. And
Right.
that's exactly what we did, right? We made a 4-year plan and followed that plan to the T. And just by virtue of us having that plan, I feel like that gave us that extra edge, which we sort of define as everyday great execution. But I had to go out there every single day and
And
execute
execute on the plan.
on the plan.
So it's interesting. So we were talking about me going to school here, right? So I went to school, I double majored. I was in the aviation program and I was in the business program. So when I would go to class in the business program, they'll say like, "Hey, Kuda, every business needs a business plan." And then when I'll go to the flight school, they'll say like, "Hey, Kuda, every flight needs a flight plan." So they seem to be a consistency there in that whatever you do, either in business or flying, you need to have a plan. But what also caught my attention is that how many people go through life without a plan, right? They want to go from
Absolutely.
point A to point B, but they don't really know how they're going to get there. So um, that experience or that upset for you made it clear that you needed to have a plan
Absolutely.
if you wanted to be in Beijing in 2028.
Absolutely.
And how did that go once you got to Beijing?
Yeah, so we sort of go through this sort of 4-year cycle following this grand plan, and we get to Beijing. And at that point in time, I just finished like my MBA, so I had a job offer waiting for me. There wasn't any pressure on me because, you know, I was preparing just for the games, and whatever happened, happened. And I was back to having fun. And I walked into those games ranked, probably not top 8, but I was ranked in the top 20. But I was having one of the best years on the European circuit that I'd ever
Nice.
had, right? So I walked into Beijing with a lot of confidence, right? And just in a position where, as I mentioned earlier, I was having like a lot of fun. And I ran like the first round, and I ran a time of 20.23. And I was actually out of all the athletes, I was ranked as the fastest person out of just the first round. That evening we went through and we ran in the second round. And again, I had the fastest time out of all the athletes, right? This is the fastest time compared to the Usain Bolts, Walter Dix's, and the Sean Crawfords.
Oh, nice.
And then we went on and I made the semifinal where I raced one of my training partners, Walter Dix. And I actually got second in my semifinal. And that allowed me to have the opportunity to be in the
final.
in the final.
That's interesting. So the day of the final comes about. You see the track lanes, who's going where. In what lane were you and who are the people next to you?
Yeah, so as people might know, any sort of track and field race final, there are always 8 athletes. So there were 8 athletes in the final. With names like Sean Crawford, Usain Bolt, Walter Dix, Christian Malcolm, Kim Collins. And I was in lane 5, right? And me being only 5'6", right? People that are shorter tend to run on the bends better. And in the lane next to me, in lane 4 was the great Usain Bolt. So you have this 5'6" guy standing next to this 6'6"
Yeah,
giant,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
right?
You were seeing him doing his thing, getting ready.
Yep, Usain Bolt was just doing his thing, and that's what he does when it's time for him to race because it calms him down,
Yep.
right? Whereas just for me, it's just more of a mental focus, and I'm just in my zone, right? And I was one of the best starters in the world. Like I used to run like a really good curve.
So getting out of the blocks.
Getting out of the blocks,
Yep, yep, yep.
right? And I can tell you that in that final, right, having raced Usain Bolt a couple times that year before, he caught me a lot quicker in the final than he had done early in the year. And I knew at that moment that it was a
foregone conclusion.
foregone conclusion, and he was going to run like a world record.
Wow.
Yeah.
And he actually did run a world record.
He did run a world record, and I just happened to be a passenger or have a front row seat
And
to
you saw
see.
everything
I saw everything
happen,
happen.
right?
I saw
And
everything
you
happen.
could feel the wind passing
Absolutely.
you,
Absolutely.
That's amazing. So now that you've finished your career as a professional athlete, right? What are you up to now?
Yeah, so Kuda, there's just a big part of me where when I think about my own story and how I got here and how Mitch planted that seed for me to even come to the US, right? I've spent a lot of time the last 15 years trying to inspire and help kids from Zimbabwe to get athletic scholarships in the US. So this is something that I'm very passionate about. But I feel like that sort of next step for me into how I can inspire like a lot more people is through speaking. So so now I've been working on trying to be a keynote speaker.
So taking over the stage now?
Taking over like a stage now, just, it's a different type of track, right? And I'm really aiming to have the chance or opportunity to speak on different college campuses and hopefully inspire the next generation of not only athletes, but just the next group of young people that are going to go out there and inspire and change the world in their own way. And as a matter of fact, I have like my first TEDx on April 22nd.
Congratulations, man.
Thank you. And yeah, I'm hoping to use that as a sort of stepping stone into more speaking engagements.
So what are you going to be talking about in your TEDx?
So my TEDx is going to be about the butterfly effect, which is a focus on how small actions can result in a big impact.
Okay, so don't tell me the whole speech, right? I want to wait for you to give it.
Absolutely.
And I can't wait to see what you talk about with the butterfly effect and how small actions result into big change. And I think we all need to take that into account that, it's not all the big actions that you need to take over time. I think being consistent, even if it's a small action done consistently, there's that exponential curve that ends up coming out of everything. So Brian, any parting words or last words you want to share with the viewer?
Yeah, absolutely. If you look at my own personal story, I was just a little kid from Zimbabwe who got inspiration from somebody that saw the sort of talent level that I had. And he planted that seed for me. And we all have greatness within us. But in order for us to achieve that greatness, we all have to take those little seeds that we have and take consistent actions, because taking those consistent actions will allow us to build something that, when compounded over time, will result in these big wins in our personal lives.
Amazing, man. Thank you so much. So listen, I have a bet, $100. I'm gonna beat him in a 200-meter dash. So check out the next video that we're gonna create. I'm gonna be smoking him on the track, right? You think you can beat me?
I'm gonna take his money.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
See you on the other side.